Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Julia Cutler, and I'm happy to welcome Michael Horn and Bob Moesta, two of the three co authors of the USA Today bestseller, Job Moves 9 Steps for Making Progress in Your Career. Welcome to you both. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks so much, Julia.
I know we're ready to get started, but before we do, let me provide some quick housekeeping information for our audience. The most important thing to let you know is that you can ask questions throughout the entire presentation, and we encourage you to do so. To submit the questions, please click the comment question button right below the video. Now, to properly introduce our guests. Michael B. Horn strives to create a world in which all individuals can build their passions, fulfill their potential, and live a life of purpose. He is the author of several books, including the award-winning Disrupting Class, Choosing College, Blended, and From Reopen to Reinvent. He is the co-founder of and a distinguished fellow at the Clayton Christensen Institute, a nonprofit think tank, and teaches at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Bob Moesta is a founder, maker, innovator, speaker, and professor. He is the president and founder of the Rewire Group, as well as an adjunct lecturer at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and a research fellow at the Clayton Christensen Institute. He is the author of Choosing College with Michael Horn, Demand Side Sales 101, and Learning to Build. Welcome. We're so excited to have you both with us today, and I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, you bet, Julia. Bob and I are thrilled to be with all of you.
Yes.
This is going to be fun, right, Bob?
Yep.
So what we're going to do is just first give you a little bit more about who we are and why we embarked on this journey, and then talk to you about the 7 top mistakes that we see job seekers make, in the hopes that you can avoid a couple of them and hopefully make progress in your career. But I'll start out by saying that our other co-author, who's not with us today, Ethan Bernstein, he is an expert on the future of talent and workplaces and how to use technology in really innovative ways to rethink organization design and so forth. And so he taught a class actually with Bob essentially over the last 15 years that really kickstarted a lot of this research that you'll start to learn more about shortly. Bob, I'll let you introduce the next fellow, who's me.
Michael Horn is one of my best friends, but he's also what I consider a guru. He's looked at as somebody to help look at the education system, teach it how to innovate, and start to really change the way we do education. And so Michael's written many books on it, trying to help basically disrupt class, and he's been doing it for almost 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah, a while. And I get to introduce you. No surprise, Bob's one of my best friends as well. I know of no one who has innovated and created as many products and services as Bob, over 3,500 in all sorts of industries, consumer packaged goods, healthcare, military and defense systems, healthcare, education. And it's been really cool to then get to work on people's careers with him. I will tell you, he's done like the mundane to the revolutionary, and he does it with the superpower around seeing patterns in the world that others don't, and help people make trade-offs to really make progress, which is animated. I would say it's safe to say both of us, Bob, but also our sort of silent fourth co-author that maybe you could talk about.
Yes. So I had Clay Christensen is the connection between all of us. Clay was Ethan's PhD advisor when he was getting his PhD at Harvard. I happened to meet Clay in 1993, which is around his first year at Harvard, and I ended up basically becoming friends with him because I asked so many questions. And so ultimately, and Michael, then I think around 2000, you started the Institute. Is that correct?
2007, yeah.
Yeah, 2007. But Clay is one of the greatest thought leaders that I've ever worked with. I've had the luxury of having a lot of good mentors, but Clay is probably one of the deepest thinkers and the most humble person I've ever met. But he said something to me that kind of really rocked my world very early in my career. And it was this aspect of questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. And the reason why this resonated so much was it was a combination of realizing like how powerful questions are. But the reality is that questions are the beginning of innovation, and that we need to actually realize that we are creatures of habit and we keep doing the same thing over and over again. But the question is that thing that creates the space for you to start to accumulate ways in which to do new things. And so my superpower is asking questions. I'm dyslexic. And so the only way I can't learn through books, the only way I can learn is through questions. And so I've been honing and refining that for 40 years, but at the same time, and then just applying it in many different places. And so happy to share with you kind of our journey of being able to figure out look at careers through this lens and understanding kind of how do we actually help people make progress in their career.
Yeah, so I think that's the perfect kicking off point, because I think it's fair to say all three of us, Ethan, you, me, we felt a little bit stuck because we were all these people would come to us asking for career advice, and we were just filled with lots of unhelpful best practices advice that lots of people give. Basically, it'll just hang in there. It'll be your turn for the promotion soon, or just follow your old boss. It worked out last time, so it'll be great this time. It's all about who keep up with your network, stuff like that. And the reality we realized was that it sounded good, but it didn't actually really understand what was it like. Why was this person asking for advice? What was it about their journey? What were they looking to do? What was the progress that they were trying to make? What was their circumstance? And really understanding, what do they want their next job to do for them? Like, why were they going to go hire it? And this was like a really big question, I would say, that caused us to rethink all the career advice, not only we were giving, but frankly, all the books and so forth were giving as well. And it led us down this path of interviewing over 1,000 individuals who had actually recently switched jobs. And we wanted to know, like, what was it? Why did they one day say, today's the day I'm going to quit my job and switch and take this other thing? Like, what were the sets of things that came together that caused them to make that big step? And I'll give you a quick preview that we ended up out of that developing a 9-step process that we started coaching literally hundreds of individuals through to help them make better choices. Interestingly enough, by the way, some people, 53%, they actually didn't switch jobs when they got to the end of this because they could reframe things and realize that actually this is the right place for them. But we realized that they were just making a heck of a lot of mistakes right along the way. And so for you today, rather than we'll sort of give you the 9 steps, but we're going to give it to you through this top 7 list, an homage to David Letterman, if you will, of the top mistakes that job seekers make. And we'll dive in with number 7, which is taking a job without understanding what progress looks like for you. And what I'll say is that when we think about taking that next job, a lot of us, the image that comes to mind is the career ladder, or like a set of stairs that I come in an entry level role. I'm going to be an individual contributor. I'll take on some new responsibilities. Then I'll become more senior. I'll start to manage people, become a director, whatever it is. And I'm sort of climbing up. But then if you actually look at real individuals and how careers intersect with their lives, it's much more winding. It swirls a lot. Most of us don't lead linear careers or lives. And so this sort of step ladder approach that we always talk about, which is career progression, is really a big mismatch for the reality that our careers loop and swirl and change directions and zig and zag and do all sorts of things that we can't explain through that framing. And look, it's a big problem. Like a billion people switch jobs worldwide every year. People on average switch jobs every 4 years. And if you look at just the Great Resignation, 100 million people leaving their jobs in the course of just 2 years, 75% of them regretted the job move. And if you look at the current workforce, almost 75% of individuals say they're completely disengaged in their work right now. But it raises the question, like, okay, if I'm just taking the next job because I think it's what's expected of me, if I flip this frame, how do I know what progress for me looks like? How do I know where I am on that pathway? And so for this, we pulled on this research that Bob is the founder of with Clay Christensen, the jobs to be done theory, which started with this question of like, hey, it turns out people don't just want quarter-inch drills or products or services. They want the outcome itself, or as Theodore Levitt said, they want the quarter-inch hole itself. But Bob, this is sort of incomplete, right? It's an entry point in the theory, but like, why do they want the hole? Are they doing it to hang a fancy, painting maybe in an art gallery? Or like me, as you know, I have a hole in the back of my closet that I punch through to pull some Ethernet cable, and the fit was just as good as a drill there. So context, right, really matters.
That's right. And so part of this is to realize that context matters. So the way that I talk about it is like, do you like steak or do you like pizza? And most people will say, well, I like both. But the fact is, if you take the last steak situation of like, I just closed a big deal, basically spending some time with my family, we're cooking outside and doing that. Like the notion of pizza in that situation does not fit. And if I look at the last pizza situation, it's like I got kids playing ice hockey. We're trying to get them back and forth. We're literally rushing to get dinner together. There's no way pizza would fit in that situation. And so it turns out that context matters. And sometimes context matters a lot. And you start to realize that ultimately it's not you that wants to, it's the context around you that gets to the point where like, yeah, this isn't right anymore. I got to do something different. That uncomfortableness causes you to basically start to look for something new. The other part is we think that we belong in categories. Like if I'm in finance, I should be, I'm finance in a manufacturing industry. It's kind of like, okay, I can only either go in manufacturing or I can only go into finance. But the fact is, when you start to look at your skills, they go a lot of different places. So the things that you think you compete with, you don't. So for example, one of the early studies I did way long time ago was I worked on Snickers. And most people think that Milky Way and Snickers compete with each other. And to be honest, they sit next to each other on the aisle. They basically are about the same price. They're actually made on the same line. But when you actually start to think about when do I eat a Snickers and when do I eat a Milky Way, it turns out Snickers competes with an apple and a coffee and a Red Bull and like things that give me energy because look, it's usually I've missed the last meal. My stomach is grumbling. I've got work to do. I don't want to spoil my next meal. Give me something I can eat quickly that will actually keep me in the zone and keep me working. Where Milky Way actually is usually eaten after an emotional experience. Could be good, could be bad. It's about eating it slowly versus the Snickers is fast. And you start to realize that it competes with things like brownies and ice cream, but it also competes with wine. And you start to realize that I actually did an interview where it competes with a run. And so you start to realize things that you think compete don't, and things that compete you don't even think of. And so part of this is helping to reframe the world to say one basic premise, which is you hire the company more than the company hires you. And that frame is around what we call jobs to be done. And so the fact here is what's happening is what's causing people to get the angst, the notion of like, God, this isn't feeling right. I got to do something different. That's the struggling moment that basically creates the space in the brain for a solution to fall into. And so part of this is if you see a person on the side of a river, right? And if they're struggling, the fact is if there's no light bulb on the other side, all people do is, so the phrase we have is bitching ain't switching. This is where people complain about their job. Boy, it should be better. But the notion is when they can see something else and they can start to understand what it's going to take, they can start to make the trade-offs associated with it. The notion is like, so when I talk about this in product, if I'm trying to get across that river, right? There's actually thousands of ways to get across that river. I can swim it. I can dig a tunnel. I can build a bridge. I can get a helicopter. I can get a plane. Like all of those things are very, very viable solutions. But when you start to look at it, it's the context of what are you trying to get away from and what are you trying to do on the other side that determine how much you're willing to pay and what you're willing to do and everything else. And so part of this is to realize that to make progress, you've got to have both a struggling moment and an outcome you desire. Right. And so it's the progress that someone is, seeking in a struggling circumstance. So if you're not struggling, you're not like I would tell you this. I don't believe you randomly showed up to this webinar. Right. At some point, you're either looking at your life and going like, OK, there's got to be something better than this, or I'm ready for my next step. Or somebody who's in the middle of this and you're trying to actually figure out how to get some information to help them and coach them along the way. That's why, again, nobody's randomly here. The reality is like there's some set of dominoes that had to fall.
And right, this is the big thing. Like people hire new things that, they don't buy products for their own sake. They hire them to do a job in their lives and make progress. And then you already said it, right? Yep. The big flip for us is this, right, Bob?
Yeah. The big flip, the ultimate flip is that so as much as when I went into this, I thought employers were hiring employees. But after all these interviews, you start to realize that there's actually choice, and most people have multiple offers. And so ultimately it's about the trade-offs you're willing to make in order to actually make progress. And so it's more like treating you as a product and realizing what's the context you need to be in, and what's the situation that has to be wrapped around you, and what are the outcomes that you need so you can flourish. And so it's this aspect of helping you try to find the right place for you, as opposed to try to find a place where you have to morph yourself to fit in.
And I'll say, to be fair, right, Bob, like most people, you use the word, we're treating them like a product. They don't see this, right? Like when you ask them how they got their last job.
Yep.
I mean, you like blind luck, right? They'll say, I know you hate that word.
Yeah.
Roulette, roll the dice, numbers game, right? They applied to millions of things and sent out lots of emails. Now AI is doing this for you.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, they think of it as a probability game. But what you've learned, frankly, through the 3,500 products and services you've innovated and created, but then also through our research with over 1,000 job switchers, is that the movement is not random, but it's causal. And so maybe you could talk about the timeline.
That's right. So what happens is that you start to realize that one is it's causal. I think we use probability theory when we really don't know how things are happening. And we just know the outcomes, but we don't know what causes it. The key is to dive into the causation behind it. And so, for example, one of the things we realized, and this is kind of universal to the approach, but there's a timeline by which people make decisions to do something new. The first thing is there's a first thought. And Clay said it well, what's the question that creates the space in the brain that causes you to say, to find a solution? And so ultimately that first struggling moment creates that space for you to go, God, I can do better, or God, this isn't working. Any of those kinds of questions create that space for you to move to passive looking. Where passive looking is where yesterday you didn't really notice anybody else's job, and now today you're starting to look at boy, could I do that job? Could I do this job? Like it's the same thing you get when you lease a car, and next thing you know, your lease is up and you see every car on the road where the day before you saw nothing. And then there's some event that, a performance review, or the fact is there's a threat of a layoff, or there's some triggering event that causes you to go into active looking, which is okay, I got to get my resume together. I got to start looking at this seriously and getting into it. But the active mode is basically where you're trying to actually figure out what you want to do. And most people just try to talk about what they did in the past and see their life as an extension of what they already did. Right. And then they basically go out and seek to try to find those jobs. And ultimately they get a job offer. And that job offer actually turns out to have not everything they want. So there's never a perfect solution. And so, or rarely there's a perfect solution. And ultimately what you have to do is you have to make trade-offs. It's I really like the people. I want to be able to do this, but I got to go into the office. Oh, I don't know. Or I don't want to go in the office. If I don't go in the office, I'm going to make less money, but I got time to myself. So you start to realize there's trade-offs along the way. And ultimately then you get hired, and then then the expectations of what you want to be able to do is set where you have expectations. And then we can talk about how you get satisfied along the way. But it's a whole process. And part of it is to understand, you don't know what you want in the beginning. The other part is there's forces along the way. There's a push of the situation. There's a pull of the new solution, if you will, right? There's an anxiety of that solution and a habit. And I talk about the fuel of the change and the friction of the change. And ultimately the fuel is the push and the pull, but the reality is the friction is the anxieties and the habits. And if most people, one of the reasons why they don't decide is not because there's enough push or pull. It's because the anxiety and habits are too big. Anxiety of the new is what's the 401k look like? Who am I really going to work with? What do I really know this industry well enough? The habits I have to give up is I'm going to leave this company. I'm going to leave this team. I'm going to leave my tenure. Is that okay? And so it's a combination of all these forces that come together that enable you to say, today's the day I'm going to leave this job and go to that job.
So I'll tell you here, we, after interviewing over thousands of people, we then basically coded these different interviews to figure out what are the common pushes and what are the common pulls that we see across all these individuals. And these are the pushes that we talk about in the book. These are the forces that say, hey, when something's not working in my current job, that I'm starting to think about something else. And Bob, you made an interesting point before we came on about this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found is that most people want to attribute it to one thing, like, oh God, I got a new manager and it feels like starting over, right? Or at some point they're working me so hard. It's like, I'm working 90 hours a week. I have no control of my life outside. But it turns out it's not any one of those. It's the set of what I've learned is at least 4 or more have to be possible for you to basically take the energy to look for a new job. And so part of this is if you want to actually create loyalty in an organization, one is you just minimize the pushes, and the reality is that people aren't going to look for a new job. But ultimately, you have to ask about these pushes and where they're at, but they come in sets.
Yeah. And so then the same thing is true on the other side, which is that at some point, generally, there's got to be some pull that pulls you to that new job. And so this is the list of 16 that we found, and similar things. It's not just one thing, it's multiple of these that come together. So it's you can imagine, I want to spend more time with others outside of my work, but I also want an employer who's valuing my experience and credentials. Right?
The one thing here that was a surprise is almost everybody says they want a new job because they want more money. But the way the method works is we don't actually accept the word money. We say, well, why do you need more money? And it turns out that there's like 4 really different reasons for money. One is about respect. I want to get paid what I think everybody else is getting paid. So I want to actually be level up to where I think I am from a professional perspective. Another one is I need more money because I've got a growing family and I got bigger obligations. And so I got to go make more money to provide for my family. 2 completely different causal mechanisms. And so part of it is being able to understand kind of the real underlying root causes of what's happening. Because again, it's not any one thing, it's sets of things that come together that enable you to basically change.
So the reason we're showing you this is in the book, the first step is to literally help you figure out what caused you to make your most recent switch to the job you're in right now. But it starts to kick off methodologies that you can start to understand what progress is looking for you in real time, even if you're not looking to switch, but frankly, guiding your next switch as well. We group these different forces. So we understand how they tend to move with each other, if you will, into 4 what we call quests for progress. And so the first one is what we call get out. So these are people who predominantly, if you will, the energy is they can't see a way to thrive in their current job. They feel like the current role is a dead end. The company's a dead end, something like that. They just need to escape. They're just looking to get out to a place that is more supportive and more challenging. But frankly, like we call them the leap before they look, folks.
Yeah,
like
that's right.
They have to get out, right? The second one is what
hold on before you move on. The one thing I want to just say about get out is that the other part is that because they want to get out so bad, they're willing to actually take that leap before they know, and they end up leaping into a situation where it's actually worse than it was before. And so all of a sudden they go from one company to, let's say, a competitor doing the exact same job, but all of a sudden it's like now they're in an environment they don't know. It actually makes more stress for them. And so the whole aspect here is like getting out is important, but the reality is like at some point, how do you get out and where do you go? That's why you need to have some of these questions asked to you.
Yeah, and this is perfect. And I'm seeing some great questions, by the way, Bob, come into the chat. We're going to get to these as we go through. And then if we haven't answered them, I'm going to make sure we circle back.
Yep.
But the second quest for progress we found is what we call regain control. So these were people that felt overwhelmed in some aspect of their life, similar in some ways to the get out folks. But they were really looking for a say in how they allocated their time and did their work. They really wanted more control, if you will, over how their time was used and how their energy was used on the job itself and how it connected with the rest of their life. Sometimes people call these the career work balance, career life balance folks. Sometimes it was about that, but I will tell you, it was also sometimes people saying like, hey, I just don't want to be micromanaged as much, right? Like I want to be able to control how I do my best work and things like that.
Or if, again, something outside is like, all of a sudden my parents need help. And so if I've got to actually put time to help my parents, it's like, I need to get some control of my time. And this career is like, I'm literally working I'm working all the time because at some point trying to go see my parents is very, very hard.
Yeah. So the third one we found, regain alignment. And so these are people that basically feels like your current employer is not valuing the experience or the knowledge or the skills that you're bringing to the table. And they fundamentally feel disrespected in some way. Like the joke that we said is like Rodney Dangerfield can't get no respect, or right.
Or, we're dating ourselves.
Or Aretha Franklin, right? Like if you
no
have that in your head, you're probably here where you're looking to go to a place where you get re-engaged along the skills and the things that you want to be doing in your career, right, Bob?
Yep, exactly.
Cool. And then the fourth one I would say is the one that it not always, but most closely matches that career ladder or stairs, if you will, from that first diagram we threw up there. These are the take the next steppers. These are people, they've reached that career or personal milestone, and they're just ready to take that next logical step in their head, often to take on more responsibility in their career. I will tell you, it's not always linear. There are some definite cool exceptions of folks we've interviewed, but in their minds, it feels like the next logical step at this point in their career.
Yeah, this one to me really started to explain the notion of like, how can people leave the company and then 3 years later come back at a senior director level? Like, this is impossible. Like, this doesn't, that, like, they bypass all the rules to basically get by it. It's like, yeah, they wanted to take the next step, and so by going outside, they actually learned a whole new set of skills that they could add to it that allows them, when they left as a manager, they can come back as a senior director. And so you start to realize, like, it's not just a next step inside your company; it could be a next step, to a different place that ultimately you come back to. And so this is one of the reasons why I always say never burn your bridges, because ultimately it's about adding value and you finding places where you can add value and people value you.
Yeah. So to be clear, these are not like hard and fast categories, because they're made up of lots of different pushes and pulls that come together. Most people, when they sort of chart where am I right now, they fall somewhere in this map of quests, if you will, where one of them is probably dominant at any given point in time. But they have elements of perhaps 1, 2, maybe even 3 quests present in their search. And we've created a set of tools that you can use to diagnose where you are right now. And so we got a question from actually, let me see where that question was. From George, saying like, it's hard to know if I'm in passive looking stage or active looking stage right now. One of them might be, frankly, understanding how many pushes are really acting on you right now. As Bob said, if 4 pushes are acting on you, you're probably not just passively looking, you're probably starting to really actively look. If you're cleaning up your resume, starting to get out there on LinkedIn and things of that nature. But if you go to the QR code here, it will take you to that bit.ly link, which is a free resource on our website, jobmoves.com, which will allow you to take an assessment to understand either the last time you switched, what were the sets of forces, or frankly, you can use it on you right now to start to think through, hey, are multiple of these playing out? And then we felt like that wasn't quite enough. And so we built this really cool product called mynextchapter.ai. It's early, still in beta, but it's an AI coach that will actually literally interview you based on the methodology and the thousands of hours of interviews that we have that will help you understand, hey, where am I right now? And like, what is acting on me right now? And help you sort of start to get to the bottom of that.
Yep.
Anything you'd add, or
the big difference to me between passive looking and active looking is passive looking is almost like I'm still doing what I'm doing and I'm not really investing any time or energy, but now I observe a whole bunch of new stuff that literally starts to pile on and go like, if I want to, like, yeah, that's not right. This is right. I could do this. I could do, but you haven't really told anybody, and you're not actively investing time or money or energy to do it. When you actually start to budget time aside, say, all right, I got to update my resume. I got to do this. I got to do that. That's when you start to be active looking, and active looking also starts where you start to communicate with other people to tell them that you're thinking about it, or you're doing it, but you're actually putting yourself out there. And so passive looking is almost that notion of like just acknowledging that you're seeing stuff that was happening before, but now you see it clearer.
Super helpful. Okay, let's drive through, because I know we spent a lot of time on just this top mistake.
More to go, right?
Yeah, of not understanding what progress looks like for you, but hopefully this starts to peel back some of that onion, if you will. The 6th one that we see is people focus on what they'll be instead of what they'll do. And the big idea here is like that we want people to think about the experiences that they'll have in a job, not the features. And the analogy we use is if you're shopping for a new apartment or a new house or something like that, the real estate listings, they're going to list, granite countertops, open floor design, this many bedrooms, et cetera, all the features. But to understand if a home's going to be right for you, you really need to think about, how am I actually going to live in that house or apartment itself? What are the experiences I have? So in my case, I've got younger kids. It's critical for me, because I work from home, to have a space where I can close the door, not hear them, and do my work from the studio. That experience, understanding that's how I'm going to live in the house, really helps me understand what features are or are less valuable for me at any given point in time. And the same thing is frankly true in the job world, which is we tend to obsess on title, money, benefits, things of that nature. And what we've realized is that, like, actually you really want to focus on what is the day-to-day of the job actually going to look like? What will you actually do on a daily and weekly basis? And does that line up with the things that really energizes you and makes you tick, brings you into flow, if you will, is so critical. And I will tell you, and then Bob, I'm sure you want to get in there, but Bob helped me save myself from making a pretty big career mistake when that was part of this journey, actually, of writing this book. In 2017, I got this job offer to be a president of a university. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. And Bob said, yeah, it does. But like, let me interview you about where you are right now in your career. And what we realized was that the stuff that I really valued at the time, like that I got energy from and I'd be doing, was 180 from what you would be doing as a president of a university. And Bob was like, I know it sounds great, but this is not the right fit for you. And I thank him every time I see him for that.
So the real key here is the energy drivers and drains, and being aware of, and I just want to give a little definition here. Energy drivers are those situations where you walk into it, and as you're doing it, you get energy out of it. So you walk out with more energy than you did walking in. And energy drains are the exact opposite. Those things you walk into and go like, oh God. It's like watching paint dry. It's like, to me, performance reviews are very much like this. But now when you reframe it, you can actually, when I reframe it around the things that give me energy, which is I love to develop people, now all of a sudden the performance review becomes something very, very empowering for me. And so part of it is to realize the more you know yourself and how to gamify the things so you get more energy, it makes work that much easier. So what I've realized is 95% of people, or most people, spend 95% of the time doing work they hate for the 5% of the work they love. And what I would tell you is if you can get that to 50-50, you don't even feel like you're working.
And this will be a critical point that we'll come back to when we talk about trade-offs, which I know someone's talked about in the questions as well. But basically, like, if you take that quest map that we have to understand where you are right now and sort of play it forward, one of the things that we help you go through is, are you really looking to build or reset on the y-axis how your job energizes you, right? And so what we really do is go into these energy drivers and drains, and we do it by going to your past. We take that resume, we flip it 90 degrees. So you got your positions on the top, you got how long you were in it, the role and the responsibilities, but then really spending time remembering anytime you were in flow on the job, those are your energy drivers. And then, as Bob said, anytime it was like paint drying, nails on chalkboard, you just wanted to be anywhere else but there, energy drains. And our tool, mynextchapter.ai, helps you through this. But I will tell you, the way I tend to think about it is like over a couple weeks, just brainstorming and slapping stickies on of any time you remember really being energized versus any time you were drained. And then understanding what were the themes across, if you will, your resume of when you were really in flow. So starting to see these things. And Bob, we typically see what, 9 to 15 or so of these.
Yeah, 9 to 15. And they're like, I like working on challenging problems. I get energy when I'm with a team that pushes me. I get energy. And so it's these themes that you start to pull out that really then for every theme there's a positive side and a negative side, and we start to actually kind of see the underlying ingredients that have to be part of your world in order to basically be the job that will be progress for you.
Yeah. And so you could literally then take your past roles and array it on each of these different themes to understand like where did this sit in the context of your past history. And what it shows you actually is jobs that you loved in the past, they're not amazing on every single dimensions. You made trade-offs to be in them, and certain things that you value super highly now are maybe frankly less valuable to you in the past. And so like, your life changes, the context changes, and so forth. And Bob, that helps you start to rank order, right? Which are the most critical energy drivers.
That's right. So, and ultimately the fact is that these things are essential for me. These things would be nice to have. And it's about prioritizing that out. And then as you do interviews and talk to people, you can have a place to kind of like score them. So you can actually compare one place to another. And so it allows you to actually kind of talk about what you want to be able to do.
So that's the first dimension of starting to understand what you want to go do next. And then it leads into the mistake number 5, which is confusing assets with strengths. I want to get to all these questions, so I'm going to rush through a little bit here. But the big idea, right, is that people, they tend to take certain like a personality assessment or aptitude test or Myers-Briggs, and then like it goes into some algorithm and says like, you should be a firefighter when you grow up. And you're like, what? And the reality actually is that just as you hire your next job, your assets, like what you're good at, can actually develop over time as well. Carol Dweck has written a lot about growth mindset. But the point I think is that like, yes, you have predilections to certain things, but you have agency over where you invest your time and what you become really good at doing. And so we talked about actually catalog your assets as a balance sheet, right? Like if you have data analytics skills, mastery of Python, maybe industry knowledge, et cetera, like build a balance sheet of your assets on one side. And then the liabilities are the time and money it takes to keep those things, to develop them and keep them up to date. And as you can see, we create a useful life for certain things. So interestingly enough, this is a real individual we coached, but mastery of Python now in a world of AI, like 4 years, the useful life of that is probably a year or something like that.
Yep.
And so you realize like she had this decision, do I want to continue to be an all-star programmer, individual contributor, or do I want to go more into management? And she couldn't do it all, right? Because the time and effort and money it would take to have all of the things up and running were actually going to be very difficult to continue to make all those investments. And they would come at sacrifice to her personal life. She was recently married and so forth. And so had to make some choices. And that helps you do the same thing that we did with your energy drivers and drains, which is really understand what are the most critical ones that you have to have, what are negotiable assets in your next role, and which are ones like in a perfect world you would love to be doing, but you're willing to say, okay, I'll trade that off so that I can get the thing that is most important to me right now. And that really helps you locate where you are on this map. Bob, before I do the next one, what would you add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is the fact is sometimes, for example, I found something is I'm a geek at heart, so I love to do data analysis. And so I actually have a hobby where I help people do data analysis. And so I tutor people in data analysis, not to make money, not to do anything, but to keep my skills up. And at the same time, allow me to get energy by helping people see patterns they couldn't see before. Because I don't do much data analysis in my day-to-day anymore. And for me to do that, I would actually have to change my role and kind of what's going on. And so I realized like sometimes I need to actually just take that thing that I really want to be able to do and turn it into a hobby. And it worked out great.
Yeah. We have a question from KS. How do you recommend rating things that you enjoy, but that are massive energy drains? Like I love talking with people, meetings and management, but it's very draining. How would you respond to that, Bob?
Yeah. So my thing is to figure out kind of, so that it sounds like this is where you have to unpack that language and say, what are the really specific things that give you energy? Is it the prep in going to the meeting? It's the fact of get your story straight. It's the fact of but the anxiety comes from like, I don't know where they're coming from. And to be honest, I'm not prepared for all their questions. And so like to actually study it a little bit deeper is what I would tell you is, and that's really what this my next chapter AI is about asking you these questions that go past the what I call the pablum level of, I like to do this, but I don't like to do it. It's like, okay, if we pull it apart, we can figure out the core elements of what gives you energy and what sucks your energy.
Yeah, and I would say Sarah asked a question when figuring out your energy drivers. Should you only choose the things or the activities that are within your control? I think you gave the example of working as a team that that challenges you. But since you can't always choose the people on your team, is that truly a driver? How does she find her drivers? And what I would say is you want to be super specific about those moments where they drain, because as you're thinking about what you do next, you want to have very clear sense of, okay, when these are the people on my team, or when I don't get to control this aspect of work, this is how it dominoes down to drain my energy. That's just one factor you'll be looking at as we get into prototyping.
So for me, one of the things I love to teach people. I love to help people make progress, and I like to do it on a small scale, 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 3-on-1 kind of the situations. But that's just not how things work. And I have extreme stage fright. But the fact is that if I really want to help more people, I have to get over my stage fright. So I hire a coach for the last 6 years to help me with my stage fright, so I can get on stage. It's not even stage, so I can stand at the front of the classroom. So now I can stand on stage of a very big group. So it's actually opened up some new assets for me. But part of it was realizing it was an energy drain, but I had to reframe it to make it an energy driver.
So let me do this fourth one, which is the fourth mistake that we often see. And this will get at some of the questions we had, is believing that job switching is a solitary process. And I will say, Bob, this is a huge mistake I see folks make, because like the folks that I teach at Harvard, they think that they're going to go get a job. They polish up their resume. They look at job postings online and they just start blitzing out resumes and cover letters and the like. And it just, there's some stuff that they have to do first about understanding around prototyping, right? And then getting into it.
So one of the things we talk about in the book is about teaching people. So like we do in product, we prototype. It's like, how do you go prototype new positions, new careers? And so one of my favorite is we asked people. I was working with somebody who was a neuroscientist and was running a lab doing some testing around it. And during COVID, the lab had to shut down. And so she had to go do something else. And so part of it is we said, all right, well, what gave you energy? And she came back with all these different things. And it turns out that we started to look at prototypes. Like, she could be a design researcher at IDEO. She could be a Nat Geo coordinator. She could be a PA. She could be a tech writer for basically magazines. And so she basically started to look, and she had done none of those. And so she basically said, so what we said is, now go find people in your network, or basically go find people on LinkedIn that says, hey, would you mind telling me a little bit about your job and how it works? I'm very interested. And most people would say, oh, that would never work. It turns out it works fabulously. Most people want to talk about themselves, and you're not really looking at their job, but you're trying to make sure you understand the day-to-day stuff, so you can put it against their energy drivers and drains. And ultimately, my favorite was where she said, like, I want to be a Nat Geo coordinator, which is like, I can go to the Galapagos Islands and I can teach adults, and we can do, we can talk about science, and I would just love to do all those things simultaneously. Turns out a Nat Geo coordinator is literally like a travel agent. They get no say on the content. They actually don't do any of the teaching. They don't do any of like that stuff. And she's like, holy crap. Like, cause she's thinking her fantasy of what that job was and what it really was completely different. And so that's the thing I will tell you, is what you think the job is. One is you usually only see the positive. You never see the negatives. So two is go talk to people who have those jobs or who have had those jobs, because you can actually start to assess what's the fit. The other part of that is it gives you actually experience in talking to people, because most people haven't looked for a job in 4 to 10 years. And so it now gives you the chance to talk about yourself and what you want to do and what gives you energy, and allows you to start getting comfortable talking to strangers.
And so I'll just stay on that for a second, because it also answers Kathleen's question, and then we'll talk about how we diverge. We look at lots of different roles, which we've put up here. And some of these are, people asked about pivots earlier. This is a great way to explore that, frankly. But this is actually a great way to start to understand questions you can ask the employer to get insight, right, on whether the job actually aligns with what you're looking for in terms of your energy drivers and the assets that you want to be doing on the job. And literally like point blank, like your questions are your energy drivers and assets.
Right.
That's your map to ask. And then if like they're not specific enough, you say like, well, can you open up your calendar and take me through like a day in the job, or show me like a week, right? When do you get to do this? And then one of my favorites was someone said like, I love opportunities to be creative. And the person was like, oh yeah, like I get to do that all the time. For them, creativity meant like working with the team and in very specific ways. And for someone we were coaching, it meant something completely different. And so she was like, oh, actually, let me pause and tell you more about what I learned about myself around what creativity looks like for me and what I mean by that word.
Yeah.
Do you get to do that? And that really got below the buzzword, if you will, into the actual activities. And it goes back to that thing we were talking about before of looking at what people do, not what the title is itself. And that's a really critical way to start to get at that. And then, Bob, we use that to converge. So maybe talk about that.
That's right. So what we end up doing is then as we look at those different career options or different ways, and again, we're not actually don't have an offer on the table, but it's actually helping us narrow. And this is how you end up realizing that the job you have might be actually really, really good, because any other job you have has too many trade-offs you're not willing to make. But this allows the actually to see kind of what it is and allow to weight it, so you can actually start to realize, what can I do to make this job better? Like if I add more of this or I take some of this away. And so one of the things we've been teaching people is how to modify the job description, because you might be perfect for 80% of that job, but there's 20% of that job is just like watching paint dry or nails on the chalkboard kind of thing. And so ultimately teaching people how to say like, look, I can do this, but this is going to take this much more time from me, and I'm much better at doing these other things. Is there somebody else who would love to do this? And so you start to realize, at least for me, I realize there's always somebody who loves to do what you hate to do. Like I have an accountant who just absolutely gets an endorphin rush when she can balance the bank account. Like I feel like it's a morphine hit for her. But the reality is like that just drives me actually crazy to because I can never get it to balance. And so ultimately I want to give it to people who love to do that work. And so this gets back to job descriptions and being able to realize that job descriptions are made up, and so are resumes.
All right. Well, I
think that's the next step.
You're getting ahead, but that's okay. I want to hit the time a little bit, but I want to hammer this point, and then maybe we'll just quickly flip through the last points and then take questions, Bob.
Yep.
I just want to hammer this home though, because it's come up a few times. 85% of jobs are filled by someone who you know. So a lot of times, again, people think, oh, it's the resume and applying online and so forth. The reality is, as you have these informational interviews, you start to sharpen what it is you want to do. You start to get clarity from the 5 different things you were looking at to the 1 or 2, and then you start looking at real job postings that match those. You are having conversations with these people, understanding what they do. People love talking about themselves, by the way. And if you're interested in them and what they do, you have something in common now, which is interest in them. And it will really help you actually find these roles. And then trusted people will say, gosh, my friend is actually looking for exactly what you just described. Let me help you get that job. And so what we realize actually is, as AI is doing more and more applying on behalf of individuals, people's networks are actually becoming more important, not less. And so it's really important to do this start of the process. I'm going to quickly whip through these last few, if that's all right, Bob. But
yep, just do it.
Yeah. So rushing to send out resumes before you understand trade-offs. Bob started to talk about that. Is like every job is going to have trade-offs in it, and you want to say, okay, if there's going to be some element of suck in this job, how do I choose the things that are going to be, that are going to suck, so that I get the things that are most important to me? One person Bob coached took less salary so that he could be the chief of staff to a startup founder of a company, so that he could sit shotgun by him and learn how to be a great startup CEO. Like that was what he really wanted to get. So he was willing to sacrifice on the dollars. Like, where is that trade-off you're willing to make? It's not settling. You're making it intentionally so you get the things that are most valuable. The second one I will tell you, Bob, I may kick it to you in a second, but you talked about this too, how job descriptions are really made up and they're more malleable than you realize at the same time. And yet a lot of times when we're interviewing, like we'll say anything just to get the job. Like it's the same way AI is tailoring our resume right now, just to make it match to the job description. But the reality is the job description is like this list of requirements from past roles. We scour what our competitors have put on their job descriptions that are similar. We come up with a bunch of hoops that we can try to weed people out. And then we have this job description and really this long laundry list. We know no one has all the skills that are possibly listed on this thing. It basically says we're looking for a unicorn. And on the other side, individuals in AI increasingly are basically looking at all the things they've ever done and just tailoring it into this resume that is constantly morphing to match the job description and presenting themselves as superheroes. And what you realize, right, is like none of the individuals looking for jobs believe unicorns exist, and none of the people with job descriptions believe superheroes exist. And so, gosh, I'm just going to call up Bob and ask, hey, do you have someone who could be great at this job? Yeah. And they default to network. What would you add quickly there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so part of it is that AI, people think AI is making it easier. This is a case where the system itself is very confounded, and it's a two-sided system. It's the employee looking for something and the employer looking for something. And so ultimately it's about how do we build match or fit. And ultimately, to me, all we have is a set of, so first of all, the resume is what I did. It doesn't mean that's what I want to do. Right. And the job description is usually like we build product in the 80s, which was like, here's what they got to do with core. And then everybody takes what they don't want to do and says, oh, can we get them to do that and to do that? And so it ends up being this wish list of trying to find somebody who will do all, like, I need somebody who's creative and can manage a budget. I would tell you those people are harder to find than you could ever imagine. And so ultimately by putting them together, you're trying to find the unicorn. But the reality is if you actually separate it into two different jobs, you'd actually have and build a relationship between those two people. You might actually have a really much better chance of fulfilling that job description.
And so you help the employer as a result of that.
That's right. That's right.
Let's hit our top mistake, that the last one we see a lot is not crafting your career story. In the book, we talk about stealing from the best storytellers around, Pixar. And they have a story spine that is like a Mad Libs of once upon a time, these are the pushes that started working on me, right? That caused me to start looking every day. Since then, I've been thinking about X, Y, and Z one day because of that, until finally, and ever since that day, we literally teach you how to craft a story along the lines of Pixar. So in 30 seconds to a minute, you can give your elevator pitch, but frankly, much deeper than that, what you're bringing to the employer. Where you are fully engaged, where those energy drivers are really clicking, if you will. What drains your energy, where you're not like your best self. And the assets you're really bringing to the table. And you can create essentially a personal cheat sheet that says, like, here's where this is going to fit and here's where it's not going to fit. Where's the room for tailoring? Where's the trade-offs we're both going to have to make? And how do we get that role for me? So maybe, Bob, I'll just cut us off there and just take a couple more questions because I think we got like 5-6 minutes left. Sound good?
Yeah. There's one question I want to address kind of right up. I think it's a quick address, which is this: how is this different from Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, right? And ultimately, what I'll tell you is they're very, very smart gentlemen. They've got a very good process, but that's about designing what you want. But it doesn't actually help you figure out kind of the trade-offs you have to make and actually landing the plane. And so part of it is that aspect of, to me, is they have a similar front end, but the fact is our back end is more about making sure you're explicit about the trade-offs you're willing to make and realize it's a process that's ongoing. So again, I'm very complimentary to that book. To be honest, I've used it several times. It's very, very useful. I've taken their class, but to me, it's more. That's the first half. The second half is this is also about employers changing their system. I think of this as a two-sided market problem, and we need to fix employers and how they do descriptions, and we need to fix employees about how they do resumes so we can actually figure out what's the work they like to do and what's the real work we have at hand.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Claire asked, what do employers have to say about your research? Are any adjusting their management practices or considering new ways to recruit or manage talent? And what's interesting is the first 75% of the book is all about individuals helping them make progress. The last 25%, which frankly could be a book in and of itself, because we're learning a lot.
Yes.
But the last 25% is, how do managers and mentors and organizations change as a result of the insights that we've uncovered around why people are actually switching.
Yep.
That's the other distinguishing feature from the Design Your Life book, is that we've done the research to actually understand the pushes and pulls that cause people to change. And so what employers are starting to do, and we're in early conversations, and some have already made the switches. Joe Carver's featured in the book. You have the folks in London, in the UK rather, the software folks, Bob. What people have started to do is actually interview people on the front end, like when they're onboarding them, right? What were the pushes and pulls that caused you to hire me? Okay, now every time we meet, to check in around performance or reviews or whatever it might be, I want to make sure that I'm not pushing you back to that very same situation that you left your last job, right? How do I actually start to develop a shadow job description that's focused less on this laundry list of skills and credentials to weed people out and things of that nature, but more around, like, what do people actually do on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? And like, where's their malleability, and how do I actually maybe say, okay, actually, you can do 70% of this job, and we'll give this 30% to someone else, but then you're going to have to do, 20% of this person's and 10% of this person's job, right? Like, how do we start mixing and matching? And so these are some of the questions that employers are starting to ask us. Let me give you another question. This is the career pivot question. Any suggestions specifically for those seeking a career pivot after they lost a job, as opposed to those who are seeking a career pivot while they are still employed? Is there inherent difference in the approach, strategy, or tactics between the two? We might have different answers in this, so go first.
Yeah. So for me, the first one is to realize when you're let go from a downsize or you're fired from a situation, the first thing I always say is you need to actually just get something so you're not bleeding. So it's like, how do I make sure that I've got some income? And so this is where sometimes I'll take what I call as a jobcation, a job I can do with one hand tied behind my back. It's not as much money as I'm used to taking, but it's like helping me reset myself. And then ultimately it allows me to then kind of really search for what I want to do and do what's next. And so I did this when I was running a private equity firm. I got burnt out. I got asked to leave. And ultimately the fact is that I ended up going and building homes. And so I didn't have to travel. Before that, I had 4 children. I was traveling all over the place. I was able to reconnect with my family. I was able to kind of make sure that I was making enough money to basically not go down. And at the same time, the fact is that it helped me realize that I want to go back and build product. And from there, I've now written 5 books. I've developed over 1,000 different products. Like, just, it allowed me to give me the space to do that. And so part of it is to realize, like, you're not looking for your career job. It's more like, how do I actually just figure out how to stabilize myself so I can then start to think about these things. Because there's so much pressure when you don't have anything, that I would tell you is like, it's something where it's like, how do you actually just get it so you can actually have the mind space to think.
So I'll give a quick answer, and then I want to do one last question before we have to end. There's so many good ones. I feel bad when we get to them all. I will say it's context dependent, right? So Bob may be right. You have to get that next thing right away. But the way I would think about it is, your quest is where you are now, not where you were. So you're now without a job, looking for that next thing. That's the quest you're on. That's your reference point, if you will. Some people will say, like, actually, I'm good. I want like 9 months to take my time, do some other things, and like figure it out. Some people, right, are like, get out of unemployment and take the first thing that comes along. Yeah. And so actually understanding where you are and what are the pressures on you, the pushes on you from this situation, are really important as a starting point. And then again, the career pivot, to me, like, the network and helping people understand how your experience actually translates into that role, and really going deep on the prototype so you understand that very concretely, like you learn before you actually are formally interviewing, is really important to that. Quick last thing. Job market's tight right now, Bob. Employers are overwhelmed by the talent pool. How do we advise job seekers today to balance what drives versus drains their energy with the primary goal of, like, I just need a freaking job? What's your quick answer?
My quick again, I think my quick answer was get something that literally will where you can breathe, and then basically take the time. The other part would be is, like I saw something up here about referrals. It's like you have to actually know what you want. This is the way that some new graduates from university have basically told me is like, this is a class on yourself. Who are you and what do you want? And the moment you can actually say that, you're actually going to be able to leverage your network better. You're going to be able to land jobs better. But most of the time, when you don't really know what you want and you only have the surface levels, I want to be a manager and I want to be, as opposed to like, I love meeting with people. I love being able to solve technical problems. Like that level of detail is the difference.
And Julie, I know we're up at a time, so you're going to come in, but I'll just answer it. Learn how to make trade-offs. Like, which are the trade-offs you have to make to get the job? And what I will tell you is, if once you are clear about what you want and the trade-offs you're willing to make, you go from 1,000 people looking for one job, frankly, to like having a conversation around fit, which is often much more like 1, 2, or 3 people looking for a job that didn't even get posted, because we know there's a huge hidden economy. A lot of jobs never get posted online. They get developed in conversations with your network. And that's why the fact that this is a social process is so important.
Yep.
Well, guys, I can't believe that hour is up already. It went so fast, but that was so much valuable information that I think so many people are going to take away from this today. And yes, there were a lot of questions about if this was recorded, but yes, you will receive a link in your email tomorrow with the recording, so you can go back and really study those slides and get that information. You can click on the link to the mynextchapter.ai, and you can also click on the link for the book, Job Moves, 9 Steps for Making Progress in Your Career. And I just want to thank Michael and Bob again for your time today and all this valuable information. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. We really enjoyed any chance to help people make